summary of Adam Smith's The Theory of Moral Sentiments and the Wealth of Nations, Historical Context and Core Themes, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, 1759, published during the Scottish Enlightenment, while Adam Smith was a professor of moral philosophy at the University of Glasgow. The theory of moral sentiments reflects the era's focus on reason, human nature, and moral philosophy. Written in 1759, it was a time when Europe was grappling with questions of morality amidst growing colonial ambitions and mercantilist economies. Core ideas. Smith's first major work explores the psychological and moral foundations of human behavior. He argues that morality stems from sympathy, akin to modern empathy, the ability to understand and share others' feelings. Key concepts include the impartial spectator, an internalized objective observer that guides moral judgment by imagining how a neutral third party would view one's actions. Sympathy as moral basis. Humans naturally seek mutual regard and approval, forming moral standards through social interaction. Human sociability. The desire for approval drives behavior, including the pursuit of wealth, which is often more about social recognition than material gain. Moral development. Conscience arises from social interactions, balancing self-interest with concern for others. This work establishes the pedagogy of conscience, emphasizing that ethical behavior underpins social and economic systems. It reflects Smith's belief that understanding human nature and morality is a prerequisite for any discussion of economics or societal organization. An inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of nations, 1776, published in 1776 during the early Industrial Revolution and the year of American independence. The Wealth of Nations emerged as the foundational text of modern economics. Written nearly 2 decades after Moral Sentiments, it reflects a world shifting toward industrialization and global trade, with Britain challenging mercantilist policies. Core ideas. Smith examines how nations generate prosperity through markets and individual actions. Key concepts include division of labor, specialization, e.g. the pin factory, increases productivity and efficiency. The invisible hand, self-interested actions in competitive markets can unintentionally benefit society by meeting collective needs. Free markets, trade and competition unhindered by monopolies or excessive government interference, foster wealth creation. Labor theory of value. The value of goods derives from the labor required to produce them. Critique of mercantilism. Smith opposed restrictive trade policies and monopolies that favored special interests over public welfare. Capital accumulation. Productive investment drives economic growth. This work applies Smith's understanding of human nature to economic systems, arguing that self-interest, when channeled through free markets, can align with societal good, provided moral constraints are in place. Connection between the two works. Smith saw the theory of moral sentiments and the wealth of nations as complementary. The former provides the moral and psychological framework for human behavior, emphasizing conscience via the impartial spectator and sympathy. The latter applies these principles to economic life, showing how self-interest operates within a moral context. For Smith, self-interest and sympathy are not contradictory, but interdependent aspects of human nature. Moral sentiments establishes the ethical foundation necessary for the economic arguments in Wealth of Nations. However, Western interpretations often prioritized the latter's economic ideas, ignoring the moral prerequisites, leading to a distorted view of capitalism that justifies exploitation without ethical grounding. Historical significance and consciencological implications. Smith's works were written during a period of European colonial expansion, including Spanish and Portuguese conquests in the Americas and later British and Dutch colonial ventures. The wealth from colonial exploitation, such as silver from Potosi, Bolivia, and forced opium trade in China, formed the blood capital that fueled Western economies. This raises a critical question. Can economic systems built on immoral foundations, e.g., slavery, colonialism, opium wars, be legitimate without addressing their ethical failures? Smith's moral sentiments challenges this by prioritizing conscience, aligning with thinkers like Confucius, Laozi, Buddha, Wang Yang Ming, Spinoza, and Freire, who emphasize moral consciousness as foundational to human action. The neglect of moral sentiments in favor of wealth of nations reflects a Western tendency to divorce economics from ethics, legitimizing exploitative practices like the Opium Wars, which devastated China, or the enslavement of Africans in Brazil. This inversion, wealth before morals, underpins the illegitimacy of Western capitalism's origins, as seen in the Treaty of Tordesillas, 1494, which divided the world without consent, and in subsequent corporate enterprises such as the Dutch and British East India Companies. Relevance to consciencological studies. Your Pedagogy of Conscience framework, Paul, synthesizes Smith's moral pedagogy with global philosophical traditions, emphasizing conscience as the foundation for legitimate economic and social systems. By highlighting the moral failures of colonial capitalism, such as the opium holocaust or Potosi's silver extraction, your work calls for a re-examination of Western economic narratives. It aligns with Confucian Ren Laozi's Tao and Buddhist compassion, which prioritize humaneness and ecological balance. Wang Yang Ming's unity of knowing and acting requires conscience-driven action. Spinoza's ethical freedom through understanding human effects. Freire's Conscientization, where critical consciousness leads to liberation. Smith's moral sentiments fits this framework as a Western articulation of conscience, neglected by colonial powers who prioritize wealth over ethics. Your pedagogy insists that actual legitimacy requires acknowledging historical wrongs, e.g., colonial theft, slavery, and rebuilding systems on conscience-first principles, fostering global peace through transparent moral dialogue.